Which wide receivers might have those boom weeks that help you win in week 5 for fantasy football? Stay tuned and we'll let you know. Welcome back, Fantasy Endgame community. I'm Pierre, he's Chris. We're going to give you our boom picks at wide receiver heading into the 5th week of the season. Chris, let's start things off. Who do you feel good about?
I feel good about Christian Kirk. Look, he was a guy, one of the biggest surprises this year, pretty much at any position, was an every week must start, and then really let you down here in week 4. Only 2 catches for 60 yards. But look at the situation. It was terrible weather against a good defense, tough to pass in it. The Eagles really didn't even have to pass a lot. Obviously, Jacksonville did have to pass a lot because they were coming from behind, but the situation just wasn't good. But he did still have 9 targets in this game. It wasn't like he disappeared or that Trevor Lawrence were targeting other people. Somehow Jamal Agnew caught 2 touchdowns, totally random. But I think it all corrects itself here in week 5 because it's the Texans. And no, the Texans aren't the worst secondary in the NFL, but they're bad enough. And this isn't going to be a game where the Jaguars are going to be trailing. The weather should be fine. I love Christian Kirk to bounce back in a big way in week 5. Again, 9 targets last week and still had 60 yards with only 2 catches. He's got tremendous upside pretty much every single week, but especially in this matchup. Don't stress about Christian Kirk. I know people, are still kind of on the fence, like, is Christian Kirk for real or not? Can I really trust him? And maybe after last week, you're feeling like you can't. You can. He's going to be great this week. He's going to boom. He's going to go off. Make sure he is in your lineup.
Yeah, we were on the verge of saying that Christian Kirk was just a no-brainer. Like, you have to start him no matter what. A disappointing game, obviously, against Philadelphia. That's against a really good team. I think he'll be better. So, yeah, I like his chances of bouncing back in a big way. All right, so speaking of bouncing back, let's talk about a guy who just got back into the lineup. That's Chris Godwin. And look, like me, maybe you were skeptical, didn't put him in your lineup. We didn't know how much he would be used or targeted, what he would do. Maybe he'd get re-injured, just like what happened earlier in the year. But he didn't, and he was used a lot. He was out there on 83% of the offensive snaps, and he got 10 targets. So it's safe to say he's a full go, and he's going to be an important part of this passing game going forward, and he looked healthy. So probably overshadowed in fantasy terms because, look, Mike Evans caught those touchdowns, and he's the one who had the bigger day. But you might not notice Chris Godwin caught 7 passes for 59 yards. I mean, that's serviceable, right? In a PPR league, that'll help you at least a little bit. But once he gets in the end zone, once he gets those bigger plays down the field, then he'll really help you. Well, guess what? He gets the Atlanta Falcons this week. And so even though it might not be this pass-heavy game script, like what we saw last week in Kansas City, where Tom Brady had to throw it throughout the whole second half, I think they'll just be more efficient and more effective passing the ball. So Chris Godwin, look, he's going to get a ton of targets. He's going to make some big plays. I feel like this is a week where he steps up his game. And you know what? He does have the more favorable matchup because as far as the Falcons go, you know what? They tend to give up a lot more plays to the secondary receivers. I don't know if you really call Godwin a secondary receiver at this point, but compared to Mike Evans, who will draw more attention from A.J. Terrell and guys like that. So I think Godwin has a big week. He's an absolute must start in week 5. All right, Chris, let's keep going. Give me another boom pick at receiver.
I had Chris Olave as my number 1 rookie wide receiver this year, and so far, I'm feeling good about that call. He has looked amazing, and it doesn't even matter if it's Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton. I don't even care anymore. Chris Olave, pretty much an every week must start, and especially this week because he gets the Seahawks, one of the worst defenses in the NFL on both, against the run and the pass. He should have tons and tons of chances, and the best part about Chris Olave is he's leading the entire NFL in air yards. That's the amount of yards the ball travels before he even catches it, which means he's already racking up a ton of yards just when he catches the ball. He doesn't have to be a guy who, has huge yard after catch ability because he's catching balls down the field. He's getting those big plays. Now, if Dalton plays, I feel really good about Chris Olave. A must start, still going to have a great game. If Jameis Winston plays against the Seahawks, Chris Olave might break fantasy football this week because he could hit on 2 or 3 home runs in this game. Not to mention he's probably going to get a double-digit target share like it seems like he gets every single week right now. And even if Michael Thomas somehow finds a way to get on the field and play, I still don't care. Chris Olave whether you want to accept it or not, is by far the best wide receiver on this Saints team, and it's going to remain that way for the rest of the season. So if you have Chris Olave, I don't care if MT plays, I don't care if Andy Dalton plays, but especially if Jameis Winston plays, get Chris Olave in your lineup, whatever you have to do.
Yeah, look, we thought he might be good this year, have some big game, big plays. Did not think that he would be among the leaders among all receivers, rookie or not, in targets and air yards. I mean, I think it's easy to say that he's legit stud. So you have to start Olave for sure. So a guy that maybe isn't must-start territory anymore is Terry McLaurin, right? Scary Terry with a kind of a scary stat line last week. You know, it was a disappointing game against Dallas. What do you do with him now? Carson Wentz not looking good the last couple of games. Well, I think this is a get-right game, mainly because they play Tennessee. Look, Tennessee, definitely not the best secondary out there, and they've been destroyed by receivers on the outside. They've, given up huge games to guys like Stephon Diggs, Mac Hollins. Look, even in week 1, the Giants receiver core of Sterling Shepard and Richie James both had good games against Tennessee. All right, this is a secondary that I think can get burned by Terry McLaurin. It doesn't hurt that Jahan Dotson might not play, right? That's more targets that will go McLaurin's way. So, and as bad as this Washington defense has been, they're going to have to keep passing the ball. So I feel like this is a bounce back game for McLaurin. I mean, we've seen what he can do. There's nothing wrong with him. It's just the offense doesn't always click. But just a couple weeks ago, we saw him have a 100-yard game. He has that in him. I think this is a week where he does it again. All right, Chris, give me one more boom that you like at receiver.
Yeah, I love Devonta Smith this year. And I know, fantasy players, they just give up on guys so quick, right? Like Devonta Smith, week 1, no catches, no targets, and everybody's like, no way. I'm not trusting this guy again. Then he has a nice week 2. And then he goes off in week 3, and everybody's like, you got to start Devonta Smith. And then he does very little in week 4, and now everybody is back off of Devonta Smith. Look, I talked about it with Christian Kirk. On the other side, this was just a terrible conditions in this game. The Eagles barely threw the ball. They didn't need to throw the ball. They were winning. They were controlling this game. Even A.J. Brown, yes, he had a nice game, but he didn't have a big game. It's going to be different this week because it's the Cardinals. And this defense, for whatever reason, is awful. Even with J.J. Watt out there, they are awful. Look, they just played the Panthers. Arguably, the Panthers are the worst offense in the NFL. The Panthers have gotten inside the 10-yard line less than any team in the NFL this year. And what did we see from DJ Moore? No, he didn't score a touchdown because, of course, he's on the Panthers, but he had his best receiving and yardage game of the entire season against the Cardinals. If DJ Moore with Baker Mayfield can do that, what is Devonta Smith going to do with Jalen Hurts? Obviously, A.J. Brown's a must start, and he's probably going to go off this week, but Devonta Smith is also going to go off this week because the Cardinals cannot stop this Eagles offense. No chance, no way, no how. So don't give up on Devonta Smith just because he had a bad week 4. He's going to rebound in week 5. He's going to be great. Get him in your lineups.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's almost a guy you need to keep in your lineup every week just because he has so high of a ceiling. So in this matchup, yeah, definitely. I mean, you're not going to find a guy who really has more upside. All right, so I feel like I haven't really gotten deep yet this year with my boom picks. I mean, I know there's not a ton of injuries. We haven't hit the bye weeks yet, but I'm going to go with one of my guys, and I'm going to stick with this game that I've talked about already, the Tennessee-Washington matchup. I like Terry McLaurin. On the other side, here's who I like. It's not Robert Woods. It's Kyle Phillips. So look, this is one of my preseason sleepers, and this is a guy, look, if you remember in week 1, he showed out. He had 6 catches for 66 yards, but 9 targets. And that was kind of eye-opening for people who didn't really know who Kyle Phillips was. He's one of these slot receivers who's shifty, knows how to get open, and that's the kind of receiver Ryan Tannehill likes to throw to because, he's not too deep. He doesn't have to worry about being accurate down the field, and he's usually open across the middle portion of the field. So I think this is a guy who's going to get a lot of targets once again. He did technically play last week. He had been questionable. He was active, but didn't really get involved at all. But that's because coming off an injury, he missed 2 games. But look, now Treylon Burks is out for who knows how long. They're going to need Kyle Phillips. He should be at full health. And, I mentioned about how bad the Tennessee secondary has been. They've given up the 4th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Well, guess what? Washington has given up the third most. They're actually worse. And so this is definitely a secondary that is vulnerable. I feel like Phillips will get a ton of targets in this game. I think he can do something with him. So this is a deep league option, but I'm going to go with Phillips in leagues where I have him. Look, Robert Woods is still a solid pick, but I'm going to throw this out there. Kyle Phillips, I think, will boom. All right, now you know which wide receivers we think are going to break out. We have a lot more fancy advice for you, including booms at running back and all our start-sit advice. You can find all that right here in our Week 5 playlist. Everything you need to help you win in fantasy.